If you own a modern car and you're planning on doing your own maintenance and repairs, something you almost have to have is a scan tool. Now, you may not love that, and that's the reason why you're not going to own anything newer than a 67 Camaro, but that's how it is. So in this video, we're going to compare two of the most popular scan tools for Volkswagen and Audi, OBDeleven versus VCDS, or VAG-COM, as I generally like to call it. Let's take a look at the individual products, starting with our VCDS from Rostec. If you swing over to the Rostec's website, you'll see they have two different options to choose from. One is the Hex V2, the other is the HexNet. The HexNet is the one I have and the one we'll be using in the demonstration. So how do you decide which one to get if you go the VCDS route? Well, if you need it to be wireless, then the HexNet is the only way to go. If you need unlimited VINs because you're going to be working on a ton of cars, the HexNet is the way to go. If you're an enthusiast with a couple of Volkswagens that you're going to be working on and don't mind it being plugged into a laptop, Hex V2 can save you a bunch of money. There's a 3-VIN version at $199 and a 10-VIN version at $299. That's a one-time purchase, and it does come with the VCDS software, and that gets fully unlocked when you connect either one of the two dongles. I guess also if you're working on modern Lamborghinis, HexNet is the way to go too. From a functionality standpoint, other than one being wireless and one not, these are going to interface with the car and behave exactly the same way in the VCDS software. Now, something to note, you'll see that these two right here are limited 3-VIN and 10-VIN versions. This is only for the more advanced stuff. If you have 5 Volkswagens and you want to pull codes on all of them, you'll be able to do that with either one of the 3 or 10-VIN versions. It's not till you get into the deeper stuff like adaptations and coatings where it will be VIN limited. So even if you bought the 3-VIN version, it's not like you can't use it at all on more than 3 cars. You just can't do the little bit more advanced stuff. Moving to the OBDeleven from our man Pauly D, you have a couple of different options. I wouldn't worry about any of this other stuff, and I'd go right to the OBDeleven Next Gen Pro for iOS or Android. Quite a bit of savings at $109.99. That also does include the full version of the app as well, which you download from the App Store or Google Play Store. Now, there's some great things about OBDeleven and some things that I don't love. The thing I don't love is the 12-month Pro Plan subscription. If you want the full version, complete capability of this tool, you're going to buy it for $109, and then every year you're going to pay $28 as it is right now to continue that subscription. So while the early investment of OBDeleven is less, over time it might end up working out that VCDS is less expensive. This does also come with 200 credit apps, which we'll talk about more what the apps do and the credits that are needed for it when we get into the demonstration. Not taking into account any user interface or any usability, if you want something that pairs with your phone, OBDeleven is the way to go. Rostec with the HexNet does have a mobile version. It's kind of like a super light version of VCDS. It'll work fine for pulling codes and things like that, but it does become a bit limited. If you want the full real deal capability of Rostec, which I'll show you in just a minute, you really do want to have it connected to a PC. We're going to start with VCDS for this comparison, and this is software that I've actually been using since 2005. The dongle that we use today is quite a bit different. You do need one of the newer ones in order to work on the newest generation cars. When I'm using this, I generally prefer to plug it in. It seems like it functions a little bit faster, hardwired into the car and into a laptop. Also, real quick, I generally, while I'm working on the car, have the key on for a long time, so I have a battery maintainer on it to make sure our battery voltage doesn't drop too low. I'll link up this one that I've been using for quite a while now. I actually really like it. It tends to do a good job of keeping your battery voltage up. We're gonna jump into VCDS first, and I'm going to show you a bit about this. Depending on what kind of car you have and what year it is and what equipment it has, some of this stuff might look a little bit different, but the workflow and things that I'm looking at are pretty much the same for everything. This is going to be your main screen. Notice we're on 22.3. The first thing I always want to do is go into options, and I'm going to make sure that I have my dongle port selected properly. Like I said, I like to use the USB and have it hardwired. If you did want to go Wi-Fi, you could click the Wi-Fi button, make sure that it's set up to your dongle, and connect it that way. But I like to use USB, so we'll connect USB. We will test it. Notice we're saying that we're good. HexNet found. Great. We'll hit OK. We'll hit save. That brings us back to our main screen. Now, I did do a deep dive on VCDS, going really far into a lot of the applications and controller channel maps. I'll link that video up. If you have VCDS and a newer car, a CAN car, basically like 2005 and up, you want to do stuff like that that I show in that video and run a full essential backup of your car. After I make sure my port's selected properly, I will come into Auto Scan, and I generally don't do an auto scan right off the bat, which would be this button right here. What that's gonna do is that's gonna pull up a list of all the modules that the gateway module can talk to or thinks it should have. This will also tell you what modules have faults, what don't, and what can't be communicated with. Here's my gateway installation list, all the modules the gateway knows that it has, and we have a handful of faults, which makes a ton of sense, especially because I was poking around with this thing all day yesterday. If you double click any of those modules, it'll bring you directly to the fault code memory. We have our release enabled active, and I think what that is the new protection protocol, which I will talk about in a minute, but this is a code that we basically don't need to worry about. So we can do a couple things here. We can print it, we can copy it, we can save it, we can clear it, or we can done go back. So we're gonna done go back. Pull this back up here where we can see our menu. Within every module, this is the menu that's going to pop up. Depending on the module and the car, will depend on what some of this reads out, what some of it is grayed out, and what some of it you're able to actually execute. So we were just in fault codes. You'll notice measured value blocks or measure blocks 08 is grayed out. Also readiness, because we don't have readiness monitors in ABS module. Advanced ID gives you some more in-depth information about the module. Advanced measured values is now where we look at our live data. So if we wanted to say, look at coolant temperature, vehicle speed, accelerator pedal position, we can look at all that stuff here. And these are live measurements of the car. If I, let's say, select pedal position sensor, actual is 14. Sometimes it'll give you a specified as well. But if I come in the car here and I mash the throttle, you can see it goes to 78%, down to 14, up to 78. So we can use that to make sure the ABS module is actually seeing throttle position sensor, and that's just one of infinite, basically, things you can look at. A lot of this stuff, we're gonna find that who knows what it is. When we're in measured value, all that we're doing is looking at what the car is seeing. This here functions basically one way. So we can't do anything, we can't make the car do anything, we can only see what the car is seeing. One of my favorite features of VCDS is the graph function. I've used this a ton for diagnosis. So I'm gonna go back in and mash the pedal again. You can see that red line going across, right? Watch what happens when I press the pedal down. It'll go all the way up to whatever it was, our 78.4%. And if I just snap it closed, it'll snap down, snap it open. Now you notice it's at 85.9, I think it says. I'm in the kick down. That's what you can do, and that's super valuable. If you're doing diagnosis, this right here makes VCDS worth every penny of the full unlimited VIN. We'll go back. This right here, SFD. This is something we got to talk about. This is new for Mark 8 and ID4, and it is a security protocol, which basically means if you can't crack this security token, you can't do anything. So typically what happens with the SFD is you go into something like an adaptation or a coding, and I don't think this long coding has any information at all. And you try and change something, right? Let's say something super easy, like we want to activate the power fold mirrors like we did a couple videos ago. If you don't unlock, it's either not going to show you what you need to see in that huge drop-down menu, right? Look at this drop-down menu of adaptations. It's not going to show you what you need to see, or it'll show you, it'll let you tell it to change, but it won't actually change because you're security locked out. So if we go to this SFD, we can actually read out the challenge token, but we can't do anything with it. And this today is where VCDS falls short of OBDeleven. So we can copy it, we can save it, but we can't unlock it, all right? And that becomes problematic when we want to do some of the cool stuff that we want to do. SFD, I tried to find some information from Volkswagen on it. There is none. It's just, hey, we introduced this new thing, deal with it. We are not going to tell you anything about it. Basic setting is sort of resetting a calibration or something like that. Let's say we put a new throttle body on the car. We would want to run the basic setting on it so that it can know its proper full open, full close resting position, and it can tell that information to the ECM. Let's look at some of the things that we could do. Let's say we replace an ABS module and we need to fill it and bleed it. That would be in here as well. Also, when we do rear brakes on this car, we have electronic parking brakes, so we got to extend the motors back in and then extend them out, and they'll do a self-test on it. You can see that end line change mode and start line changing mode, both to basic settings. So that's why you'll find stuff like that. Output test, this turns stuff on. I like to use lighting for an example on this one. This has a brake light option. Let me hit start. So right now inside the car, the ABS and brake light is flashing. This is a super valuable diagnostic tool when you're not sure which side of something isn't working. You can output test, and that tells you that the end side, right, the thing that does something is either working or not. Then you can test the control side. Coding, this is where VCDS initially blew factory scan tool out of the water. It's not gonna show it in this module. I'll grab another module and show you that one. Adaptation we already looked at. This is changing stuff, turning on power fold mirrors, turning on comfort open close with remote. And then security access, some modules also need a security access in addition to the SFD unlock. Go back, let's go to something that's probably a little more sorted, the ECM. Also, it's important to note, no matter what scan tool you're looking at or using, what you're seeing out of these modules is the same information. It might be labeled differently, which is challenging. Like I can tell you VCDS labels things a little bit clearer than Otis, the factory scan tool, will. But all you're doing is looking at what the car is looking at. VCDS is my go-to. It's the one in general that I prefer. I'm gonna go into coding here. You can see this giant long number right here. If we go to long coding helper, oh, is this one not sorted either? This one's not sorted either. Let's go to one that is sorted. I know driver's door electronics I know is sorted. So I can actually navigate VCDS much, much faster than I can OBDeleven. But with the release of Mark 8 and SFD, I've gained a new appreciation for OBDeleven. Ultimately, it depends on what you're gonna do with it. If you're a shop, you should have Otis, the factory scan tool. You better have VCDS. I don't know how you're fixing people's cars without it. I'm sure there's other ones that do it, but VCDS does it better. Okay, I went into driver's door electronics, and I know this one has a long coding and a long coding helper. So there's a couple things. One up here, these are the two modules that are controlled. A lot of times it's a main and a secondary module. That's your selection up here. This is our long coding, this big old digit right here. If we go to long coding helper, there's nothing in the first one, but here, this is stuff we can turn on and off, right? Loudspeaker gate illumination. What's that? I have no idea, but you could turn it on or off. Something to keep in mind, the modules for these cars a lot of times are exactly the same. So the Golf and the Atlas and the Arteon and the Tiguan might all use, and other cars, Skoda and Seat, might all use the same module. It's just gonna be coded and adapted a little bit differently. I can show you here when we went in for the power fold mirrors, I changed bit 4 and bit 6 to tell that driver's door module that it had power fold mirrors. So we'll exit out. That's what you can do. If you decide to change anything, it'll drop your new coding right here. You click do it. It'll ask you a couple of confirmation questions, and then you're good to go. You'll notice readiness is blocked out, but we don't have the SFD unlock, so you don't have to worry about it on this module. It's only certain modules that are locked out, and I don't hate it because I've seen a lot of people screw their car up going in changing things that like they have no idea what they're actually doing. So here's our VCDS. You can also run a full scan. This will ping every module, extract the faults, put it all in this list that we're looking at right here. You can also do some other things like reset maintenance intervals if you go to the SRI reset. This works on some cars, it doesn't work on other cars. You're gonna find that the difference between, say, this 2022 car versus like an 04 Mark IV, the scan tool does a lot of different things. The newer the car, the more capable it is. The older the car, the less options you have to change. So pretty cool stuff there with VCDS. Now let's move into our much smaller dingle dongle for OBDeleven. I'm using this on iOS. There is an Android option as well. Here is kind of the screen that pops up when you first open up the app. Something to keep in mind, you do need to have cell reception or beyond Wi-Fi, I think, for OBDeleven to work. Not the end of the world. We have that just about all the time anyway. Let's go ahead and connect to our vehicle. Make sure we get the right OBDeleven unit, enter your password, and now what it's doing is it's essentially doing the same thing VCDS did, where it's checking your gateway installation list to see what modules you have and which modules have faults in them. So when I think of OBDeleven, we're looking at this nice interface, got a picture of a Golf, very cool. Our battery voltage displayed right there, love that. I will tell you, especially if you're a DIYer, the interface is pretty nice. When I'm using a scan tool, I'm using it generally from a diagnostic standpoint. So I see this as taking up space for something that I would otherwise be able to have data on. Now, I haven't done any like head-to-head time trial testing on this, but it does feel like OBDeleven is a touch slower than VCDS. If we hit this tap the scan button right here in the center, that's going to interrogate each module and pull up our faults. We'll notice up at the top, right below where it says Volkswagen Golf, we have a bunch of grayed out symbols. This is because we haven't directly talked to each one of those modules yet. We can go ahead and disconnect from our dongle right here. At the bottom, you have your profile, tells you how many credits you have, which becomes important. If you're going to be doing things with SFD Unlock, you need to have two-step authorization on, and I have the Pro version, which now does carry a subscription. Vehicle, here's a little bit about our car, the VIN, the mileage, some history, that kind of stuff. Something we can also do now in OBDeleven is back up our car. This, I think, is a newer feature anyway, and this backs up coatings, adaptations, advanced ID, and live data. VCDS does the same thing before you change anything in your car at all. Like when you first get it, run this back up and make sure you have that saved somewhere safe. That way, if you ever have to go back to it, you can. Something here that I don't know if OBDeleven does, but VCDS will, is for some of these adaptations, if you save it properly, it'll also dump it back in if you really mess it up. So we can back up there, which is awesome. They also link out to their forum, which I will be honest, I haven't spent a ton of time on. Here you can see there's plenty of questions that have been asked on their forum. Let's go back into our app. We go to home, that brings us back there. The real winner for OBDeleven is the apps function. So down here in the bottom right, if we click apps, you'll see this menu. Now the apps that are listed for Mark 8, there's not a ton. But if we were to pull this on our Mark 7, there would be a bunch more. And this is pretty basic stuff, right? DRL with fog, fog lights with high beams, which is against the law in North Carolina and probably other places. Window auto drop, cornering lights, lock, unlock visual confirmation, horn always operable. Most of our cars only work with the horn with the key on. This allegedly will do it with key off. Mirror dip, nav in dashboard, video in motion, I didn't get to work. Sound actor, so if you don't want to hear the sound actor, you don't want to go through the adaptation to turn the volume down to 0, you can just boop, hit that, and it will automatically do it. So that's the cool thing, right? With these apps or with the retrofits, if you do something like install power fold mirrors and you're like, Charles, that changing all those adaptations with long German words or changing the coding is scary and I don't want to screw my car up, you can go in here and you can just hit one button and it does all of that for you. In fact, for power fold mirrors, I've sent the data over to Paul and for him to send over to the OBDeleven guys. The only negative to that is you have to pay for it, okay? You'll see this little box right here that says 10 with a little symbol on it. That costs credits. 10 credits for DRLs with fog light. The video in motion was the expensive one, right? 100 credits. Most of these you'll see are just 10 credits. So here's a good one, seatbelt warning light. If you click that, it's gonna tell the car, hey, don't turn on the seatbelt warning, whether the driver has their seatbelt on or not. 10 credits is the price. I have 343 credits, which is, I'm rich in credits. If you want to get an idea of how much that actually costs, if you go to the credit balance, free credits, 5 ads, I don't want to watch any ads. If you do 10 credits, it's going to cost you $2 plus tax. So if you don't want to mess with all the stuff, you can spend $2 and it'll do it all for you, which I don't love, but also for a lot of people, going in and changing adaptations and coatings is very intimidating. So I think having that as an option is pretty cool. I'm always, at least most of the time anyway, going to code it myself. If this is your first time messing with that stuff, use the credits. You got like 200 of them when you bought the tool, go ahead and use them. You can see we got a bunch of stuff. Comfort windows, I probably will, just to try it, use that. You can change a bunch of displays. Retrofits, we'll see more stuff coming soon. Workshop is pretty cool too. Brake pad replacement. So if you remember back in VCDS, we had the like start and finish of lining. That's this brake pad replacement one right here. You can also, it tells you make sure you have the hood up. That's actually really common on most newer protocol stuff. Oil change light, $2. Inspection service, $2. Fuel priming, $2. TPMS, $2. $2 at a time adds up quick, but if you're like, I don't have time or I'm scared or whatever, or you do it once a year, who cares? Pay the $2 and get it done. Let's try to duplicate what we did in VCDS here in OBDeleven. It also looks like I need to turn my battery charger on a little bit higher. So if we tap to scan, that'll do all the modules. But I like down in the bottom right here, this little square gear thingamajig, that brings us to our module list. So if we sort by status, that's who's got faults, who doesn't. You see the red here in the top left corner, that indicates there's a fault. This top number here in red always has, and I like to believe always will, correspond to the module engine. So these are called address words. Address word 01 should always forever be engine. Address word 3 should always forever be brakes and ABS. Central Electrics has changed over the years. You can see we got some pretty cool modules: adaptive cruise, dash, gateway, brake booster, because we now have an electric brake booster instead of vacuum, We got lane assist right, which leads me to believe we have lane assist left. Multimedia, park assist, heads-up display. I love the heads-up display. And a whole bunch of other stuff. Like you can see, we can just go on for days. So you can sort by the modules that have faults versus don't if you prefer. We can sort by name, that's alphabetical. I like to personally sort by ID number. I don't know all of the new stuff, but I remember a lot of them. So when I'm looking for something, that's how I do it. I would like the option to search 01, 03, 15 for airbag, whatever it is. I think that would be like this little pencil here up in the top right. If we could search that way, that would be really killer, but that's not an option. So we were in brakes before, let's go back into brakes. Clearly we're looking at an incredibly different interface than we had with VCDS, but it's all the same information, just laid out differently. Info, this is going to just be some deep scan stuff. We got software version, hardware version down here at the bottom. Fault codes, I don't even remember what the fault code was. It's probably something irrelevant. Release active. So that means I had the FSD unlock messing around with this yesterday. That's why that's there. What's cool about this, the new stuff, is it tells you all the parameters for the fault when it was stored. We don't care that it's still there. Live data, this is our measured value blocks. So what was the thing that I was messing with in VCDS just to compare? Was it throttle? I thought it was throttle. Engine speed, oh yeah, here we go. Accelerator position, hit done. 14.1, 14.5%. If I mash that, you should see it jump up. Same data that we were extracting out of VCDS. And if you wanted to go back, you can add a bunch. Never select all. It'll not update fast enough for you. That'll be a bad, painful time. Reset. I don't know what that does, actually. Let's hit it and find out. Hard reset. So this is like a module reboot, kind of like a cap discharge. That's actually cool that it has in there. Some of the other modules have function clearing state, which I think is like a 5F module thing. It's probably not anything anybody cares about. Long coding, no options for long coding, just like the other one. It's not been cracked yet. Adaptation. Adaptation in OBDeleven is a little different than adaptation in VCDS. In VCDS, we got that big list, right? Just words. In OBDeleven, sometimes they group stuff together. And I'm gonna try and find one that actually does that. Developer function, maybe? So here, when we click on developer function 01, I don't know what this means. I don't know what this does, but it does pull up a bunch of stuff that we can change within that. If you don't know what you're doing, don't change any of this stuff, especially in brakes. Security access, if there was a login, it would pop up. There are a couple modules that they have the login cracked for it. Here's the big one, right? This next part is really today why you either kind of need OBDeleven or you need both. I have both. I will probably continue to use both, but this here with SFD makes OBDeleven worth the whatever it costs, $110 today. If we go into SFD protection, access to SFD protection features will be locked and require a new access. So I actually still have this unlocked. Let's go ahead and lock it. Then I'm gonna go back in and unlock it because I apparently didn't lock it back up. That's why we had that fault code, by the way. Okay, so let's pretend that didn't happen, and now let's go into FSD protection. By unlocking FSD, you will get the ability to adjust the protected features for 90 minutes. So Volkswagen has locked stuff out. If you don't do this, you don't get to change it. You might not even be able to see it without doing this, but watch what I do. Remember that big long code in VCDS? This is how we solve it in OBDeleven. We hit unlock, and then it unlocks. Takes a second, but then it works. Great success. Here we go. Now, if we were to go in and want to change something that was unchangeable before, we can do that. When you're done changing whatever it is, go to FSD protection, hit lock, and boom, you're locked back up. You don't have to worry about it. I was able to code the power fold mirrors to open and close with the key, right, with the remote, using OBDeleven in Central Electric. So here's Central Electric's. If we go into SFD protection, if you want to do this particular thing, I have a video on it that you should just watch that, but this is kind of an example of how I did it. Now we go into adaptation. We are going to use our search function, SPI. So this long German word right here is mirrors. I won't even do the disservice to the language to try and butcher it. This is where I changed. So this is like menu for synchronizing mirror function, I think. Like this one right here, menu mirror something or another, was not active. I turned it to active, and that pulls up now the option for more stuff in the menu inside the car. As you can see, you're basically doing the same thing with either of the two scan tools. It's the interface that's different, it's how we look at it, it's the manner in which we're seeing these things that really sets the two things apart. OBDeleven, VCDS, both incredibly capable tools for the DIYer or someone that's a professional. I used VCDS at the dealer all the time, long before OBDeleven was really a thing. But which one is right for you? So this is how I would make the decision. I would make the decision on a couple of things. One, budget. VCDS for the full version with wireless and everything is not cheap. So if you don't have that kind of budget to spend that money, it's a no-brainer, you get the cheaper one. If you have a couple of Volkswagens and you don't need to do it with your phone and you want to go with like the V2 3-VIN one at $200, I think that's a pretty good buy. You can always upgrade down the road if you want to. You can also get the 10-VIN one as well. So that's a way to save a couple of bucks but still use VCDS. At the $200 price point though, you're not using anything mobile, so you gotta have a PC or boot camp on your Mac. For the money, OBDeleven does a lot. The fact that you can buy a couple of credits, and it comes with credits just right out of the gate when you get the Pro version. The fact that you can pay $2, hit one button, and not have to worry about, did I code this right or did I not? What was the original value? That's huge. It's also nice, it's small, you can just leave it in your car. I wouldn't recommend necessarily leaving it plugged in, but you can just keep it in your glove box so you have it all the time. The fact that it's app-based and right on your phone is really, really nice. And OBDeleven does a lot of the same stuff with an interface that I think a lot of people are gonna find more appealing than kind of the old architecture of VCDS. VCDS is very close to what the factory scan tool looks like. So for someone like me, that's what I'm used to looking at. But that other display is nice, right? I like that it shows the battery voltage, and the picture of the car is cool, and all that stuff looks really, really cool. Here's what it boils down to, and this is just my opinion. Ultimately, you have to make the choice for yourself on which one is better. They're both basically gonna do the same thing. If you are diagnosing cars at a shop or for your group of friends or something like that, I think VCDS is the better, more capable tool overall. The graph function for measured value blocks is huge. I've diagnosed sporadic wheel bearing failure with that the factory scan tool would never pick up because you're just looking at numbers, not graphs. Yes, a picoscope would have done that too, but we didn't have that available at the time. So if you're diagnosing cars, I think the full version VCDS is the way to go. If you're old and stubborn like me and like to look at things the way VCDS is displayed, VCDS is the way to go, even if you buy one of the lower models that isn't full unlocked VIN, but remember, you can always upgrade. If you're the average DIYer and you're only gonna do things like set comfort windows to open and close, install power fold mirrors like we did a couple weeks ago, service a transmission 4 times in the whole life of the car, or you want to play around with some of those retrofits or the changes, I think OBDeleven might be the better play for you. Either way though, remember, you can do all of this stuff on both of the scan tools, but if your main thing is slight modifications to your car, European taillights on the Mark 7.5, for example, power fold mirrors on the 7.5, Kessie, rear door Kessie, you can do all that with either one, but in a lot of cases, doing it with OBDeleven for the average person is way more user-friendly. So there you go, the VCDS versus OBDeleven. Which one is better? It really is gonna depend on how you're gonna use the tool and what you're looking for out of it. For me, going forward, I'm gonna use both. They both function a little different, and I can leverage the one that works best for what I'm trying to do. But no matter which one you pick, if you're DIYing your modern VW Audi, you kind of got to pick one or the other. Of course, there's hundreds of other scan tools that'll do stuff to the car, but Volkswagen and Audi, and most German cars really for that matter, do have some special needs, and we need to account for that. So with those two tools, you really do have kind of the best of the best. I'm working through the Carly one now to see if that'll be a contender as well. We'll talk about that in the future. So I'm going to put links to everything we talked about today down in the description, including a couple of those VCDS videos that I have done in the past. I've done an OBDeleven video, but I think that's so far outdated that don't waste your time. This one we went deeper on. With that, I'm out. Have an awesome day. I'll talk to you again next time. Also, link that battery charger up because you don't want to kill your battery.